My girlfriend cheated with her best friend's boyfriend and lied to me. My mom has cancer, just to skip work and be with him. She borrowing $15,000 from her boss for the fake treatments, until every one of her sick lies finally fell apart. Have you ever come across a compulsive liar? I'm not talking about someone who exaggerates to look good, but about those people who lie for no reason, as if they do it out of habit or as a reflex. I want to tell my story, because even today I can't understand what was going through her head. With my parents, I moved to another area when I was 17. Across the street lived a girl named Carla. At first, we were just neighbors, then friends, and eventually, we started dating. The years passed, we grew up together, and when we both had stable jobs, we decided to move in and share an apartment. By then we had been in a relationship for almost 7 years. Our families knew each other well. We had been neighbors for so long that everyone treated each other with trust. My parents were fond of her, and I got along well with hers. Even when my parents moved away, shortly after I moved in with her, that closeness between the two families remained intact. Carla and I had built something that on the surface was solid. We worked, we paid the rent together, we split the expenses, and we led a quiet life. We didn't have major problems. Yes, an occasional argument like any couple, but nothing out of the ordinary. If someone had told me then that everything was going to fall apart over an absurd lie, the kind not even a child would tell, I wouldn't have believed it. Because that's how it all started, with a senseless lie, so ridiculous that even today I find it hard to understand. It was a Friday, I remember it perfectly. Carla texted me in the afternoon to let me know she would have to stay a couple more hours at work. She told me that one of the projects had gotten complicated and they had to finish a report before Monday. It didn't seem strange to me. At her company, overtime was common, and besides, she had never complained about staying late. So I simply replied that she shouldn't worry, that I would make dinner. That night she arrived at the apartment around 8, as she had said. She was calm, talkative, with no signs of tiredness. We had dinner together, and everything seemed normal. If you had asked me at that moment, I would have said it was just another night in our routine. But the next day, a small detail changed everything. On Saturday morning, I went to the gym. While resting between sets, I started checking Instagram stories. Among them, a post from Carla's mother appeared. It was a photo of the two of them smiling with shopping bags in their hands. The text said something like, "What a joy to be able to go shopping with my daughter." In the comments, a friend of the mother asked what store they had been to, and the lady replied, "We went to the mall together yesterday." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, confused. Yesterday, meaning the same Friday afternoon when, according to Carla, she had been working overtime. I thought maybe the post was old, that the photo was from another day, but the comments were dated from the previous night. The first thing I felt was bewilderment. Not anger, just surprise. Why would she tell me she stayed late working if she had gone out with her mother? It wasn't something bad. Nobody gets angry because their partner sees their mom. There was no reason to hide it, and, as I mentioned, I always had a good relationship with her mother. I spent the whole way back thinking about it. I tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe her mother had stopped by her work, but then I remembered that she herself that night had mentioned how late she had been with the report. It didn't make sense. When I got to the apartment, Carla was in the living room. I asked her in a neutral tone if she had gone out with her mother the day before. She looked at me for a few seconds as if she needed to think about the answer. Then she nodded and said yes. She had seen her for a while after work. I didn't say anything yet. I showed her the post from my phone and added that it seemed they had been shopping for several hours. She shrugged, half smiling, and said, "Yeah, we went out for a bit. Nothing important." I asked her what time she had left work. Instead of answering me, her expression changed. She avoided my gaze and I noticed she was uncomfortable. In the end, she admitted that she had left a little early, that her mother had called her unexpectedly, and she decided to take the opportunity to see her. The strange thing was her reaction when I asked her why she hadn't told me. "Because it was easier," she replied. That phrase completely threw me off. Easier? What was easier, lying than telling the truth? I insisted that it made no sense. It wasn't forbidden to see her mother, nor was there any reason to hide it. She got upset and started to get defensive. She said I was exaggerating, that it wasn't a crime, that I was making a problem out of nothing. I replied that the problem wasn't going out, but lying. If she had told me the truth, nothing would have happened, but she chose to lie. We argued for a good while. She said she simply didn't think it was important, that she didn't want to give explanations. I told her she didn't need to lie to avoid a normal conversation. At one point, she even laughed as if the whole thing was silly. "Okay, sorry, I didn't think you'd take it so seriously," she told me. That night we didn't talk much more. I went to bed with my head full of doubts. I didn't understand this need to lie. What else might she have hidden from me because it was easier? It was a strange way of looking at life. It wasn't a lie to hide a mistake or avoid punishment. It was a gratuitous lie, without purpose. And that, more than anger, bred distrust. At that moment I still thought it was an isolated case. I didn't fully trust her, but I didn't think there was anything really wrong behind it either. But the next day, something else happened. That Sunday we were both at home. It wasn't a particularly special day, but we spent it quietly. There was still tension between us from the argument, although she made an effort to be affectionate, trying to make up for the bad time. She cooked, helped me tidy up the apartment, and was even more attentive than usual. I wanted to think things were getting back to normal. In the afternoon, we were talking about the month's expenses. Among the things we had to pay was the internet service. I asked her if she had already paid it, and she said no, but she had the money set aside in her account. To be clearer, she used to make payments from her laptop, where she kept her bank accounts open. I also used her computer sometimes to pay for things for both of us, and we both knew each other's passwords. There were no secrets, or so I thought. A while later, Carla went to take a shower, and I took the opportunity to pay the internet bill from her account. But while I was in there, checking the account statement, I saw something that caught my attention, a transaction, a direct payment to Michael Kors. For those who don't know the brand, it's a fairly expensive line of handbags and accessories. It's not unattainable, but it is a significant expense. And that's when it all raised a red flag. A couple of weeks earlier, Carla had come home excited, smiling like a little girl. She had a new handbag, a Michael Kors, and she showed it to me proudly. She said her best friend, Fernanda, had given it to her as a token of affection. According to her, it had been a gift for no reason, just out of friendship. I thought it was strange that a friend would spend so much money on a gift, because that handbag easily cost 200 euros, but Carla and Fernanda had always been very close. They gave each other gifts, told each other everything, and spent a lot of time together. I saw no reason to doubt, but seeing that payment in her account changed everything. The transaction was clear: date, time, and the store's name. The money had come directly from Carla's account. So why had she told me it was a gift from Fernanda? I thought for a second that maybe it was one of those cases where someone pays for something for someone else and then gets reimbursed. But I checked the transactions, and there was no recent deposit. There was no doubt. Carla had bought the handbag, and the most absurd thing was that she had no reason to lie. She worked, she earned her money, and she could buy whatever she wanted. I had never criticized her for an expense, much less controlled her money. So why lie? Why say Fernanda had given it to her when she had clearly bought it herself? Another lie, as unnecessary as the last one, but I could no longer ignore it. The idea began to grow in my head. If she lied to me about such small things, what else could she be hiding? I tried to calm down and not jump to conclusions, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I didn't say anything to her. I watched her peacefully, watching a series as if nothing was wrong, and I found it hard to understand how she could lie so naturally. On Monday, as I was coming home from work, I ran into Fernanda at the supermarket. She didn't live far from us, and it was common to see her in the area. We greeted each other normally, but in my head, I was already thinking about how to bring up the subject without sounding suspicious. While we were talking about trivial things, I casually asked her if she knew the brand Michael Kors. Fernanda smiled immediately. "Of course," she said, "like Carla's handbag." I tried to stay calm. Before I could say anything, she continued talking and, with a smile, added, "You really outdid yourself with that gift. Seriously, I wish my boyfriend would buy me something like that." I didn't know what to say. I smiled uncomfortably. I made a vague comment and changed the subject, but inside I was boiling. In that instant, I understood that Carla had told a completely different story from the one she had told me. She told Fernanda that I had given her the handbag, and she told me that Fernanda had given it to her. Two versions, both false. Why? What was the point of lying like that? If she had told me she bought it herself, it would have ended there. But no, she needed to invent, to tangle things up, to create stories for no reason. I went back to the apartment with a mix of anger and bewilderment. I didn't know whether to confront her or wait. I had no logical explanation for all of this. I started to wonder if I was the one exaggerating, if I was seeing things that weren't there. But every time I remembered her expression when she lied, her casual tone, I became convinced that I wasn't crazy. That night, Carla went to bed before me. I watched her sleep as if nothing was wrong, so calm, so peaceful, that it made me angry. And that's when I did something I never thought I would do. I checked her phone. It wasn't an impulsive act. I thought about it for a while. She and I knew each other's passwords, and she always told me she had nothing to hide. I repeated that phrase in my head as I unlocked the phone. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just wanted to understand. But what I found destroyed me. There were messages, photos, videos, everything. Long conversations, full of intimacy and words that were no longer mine. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was cheating with the least expected person, Martín, Fernanda's boyfriend. I froze. It took me a few seconds to process what I was reading. The dates, the places, the tones, everything fit. They spoke to each other with a confidence that only time can bring and mentioned meetups, excuses, and plans. There were messages from days when I thought she was working late. Then I started to connect the dots. I remembered the Tuesdays and Thursdays when she said she was staying late to work overtime. It was common at her company for them to ask for extra help outside of work hours, and she had even shown me a signed document confirming it. During all that time, I didn't doubt a thing. In fact, it coincided with my own schedule because on those days I was taking a specialization course at night and came home late. It all added up, or so I thought, but reading the messages I understood the truth. On those days, she didn't stay at the office, she met up with him. Martín would pick her up at 4 in the afternoon when her normal workday ended at 6. But how was it possible for her to leave work early every week? In the messages, they talked about the places they met, what they did afterward, and how they coordinated so no one would suspect. I stared at the screen with a mixture of disgust and sadness. I couldn't understand how I hadn't noticed it before. This woman sleeping so peacefully beside me had built a web of lies that crossed everything. She lied to me, to her best friend, to her boss, and to anyone necessary to maintain her double life. I barely slept that night. I could only think about how to act, what to say, how to expose everything without leaving any loose ends. So I took screenshots, saved the conversations, the photos, and everything that could serve as proof, not just for me, but also for Fernanda, because if anyone deserved to know the truth, it was her. And I was not going to stand by while that woman continued to lie to everyone. The next morning, I asked for time off from work. I wouldn't be able to concentrate knowing everything I had in my head. I had a plan, and that plan started with a surprise visit to Carla's company. Mrs. Maria, her boss, held her in very high esteem. She was the owner of the company, a woman in her 50s, strong-willed but fair, the kind of person who trusts others and expects the same in return. That's why, when I decided to go talk to her, I didn't do it seeking revenge, but answers. I went straight to the company that morning. Carla worked in another area, so she didn't see me pass by. Mrs. Maria received me with a smile, surprised to see me there. As soon as I sat down in front of her, I got straight to the point. I asked her why Carla was leaving early on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The woman's expression changed completely. She was silent for a few seconds, looking at me as if I had just said something crazy. "But don't you know about her mother?" she finally said in an incredulous voice. "What about her?" I asked, not understanding anything. Mrs. Maria looked at me with a mixture of pity and surprise. "Well, she has cancer," she said, lowering her voice. I froze. "What?" I blurted out. "What do you mean she has cancer?" And then she told me a story that seemed straight out of a novel. Months ago, almost at the beginning of the year, Carla had spoken to her in tears. She told her that her mother had been diagnosed with cancer and that she had to accompany her to treatment sessions every Tuesday and Thursday. That's why she asked for permission to leave work 2 hours early, although she promised to make up the hours on other days. The lady, moved, agreed without a second thought. As she told me this, I could barely believe it. I told her that Carla's mother was perfectly fine, that I had seen her just a few days ago, and that she had never been sick. Mrs. Maria was speechless, her eyes wide open. The silence that followed was long and heavy. Then I told her everything, that Carla used those days to meet with her best friend's boyfriend, that it was all a sham. When I finished, Mrs. Maria stood up abruptly and slammed her hand on the table. "That bitch," she shouted. "I can't believe it. I even gave her money." "Money?" I asked, still confused. Then she explained everything. Not only had she given her permission to leave early, but she had also granted her a loan of $15,000 to help with her mother's supposed treatments. She opened a drawer and took out a folder. Inside was a document with Carla's signature stating that she had received the money as a loan, to be repaid with 10% of her monthly salary and without interest. I looked at the paper and felt a mixture of rage and disgust. It was Carla's handwriting, her signature, her lie turned into paper. "And to think that everyone here was worried about her mother," said the boss, trembling with indignation. "We raised money, held small collections, and she was happily parading around with her lover. I'm not going to let this go." I didn't know what to say. The only thing I could add was that a few months ago Carla had told me a story about a very distant uncle who had died in another state and had left her a small inheritance. With that money, we had taken a trip, bought new furniture for the apartment, and paid for some pending things. Now it all made sense. The inheritance never existed. It was the loan money. Mrs. Maria sank back into her chair, still unable to process it. "I don't understand," she murmured. "I saw her as a daughter. I entrusted her with responsibilities. I gave her opportunities, and this is how she repays me. There was no point in staying there." I said goodbye, thanking her for telling me everything, and left the office angrier than ever. On the way, I could only think about the number of lies Carla had had to maintain. Lies within other lies, one after another. She wasn't just a cheater, she was a full-time manipulator. The next thing I did was look for Fernanda. I knew where she worked, and although I didn't want to be the one to ruin her day, I had no choice. She deserved to know. When I told her everything, at first she didn't believe me. The expression of disbelief on her face was the same one I had had hours earlier. I showed her the screenshots, the messages, the photos, the schedules, everything. There was no room left for doubt. Fernanda broke down. She hugged me in tears, repeating over and over that she couldn't believe it, that Martín couldn't have done that to her. She told me that he worked with her father and that they considered him almost like a son. She knew the news was going to devastate them. She asked me for the evidence to show them, and I gave it to her. I left there with a lump in my throat, knowing that I had just opened another wound. I returned to the apartment only to pick up the most important things. I couldn't stay there for when Carla returned with all her lies collapsing around her. I packed what was necessary: documents, some clothes, my most valuable belongings. Also passwords. I blocked accesses, closed shared accounts. I didn't want her to have any way to remain in my life. And finally, I made one last stop. I went to see Carla's mother. The woman received me with her usual kindness, but her smile vanished when I started to speak. I told her everything. At first, she didn't believe me. She said her daughter might have made mistakes, but she would never be capable of something like that. Then I showed her the evidence. I explained that Carla left every Tuesday and Thursday to accompany her to cancer treatments, when in reality, she was seeing her lover. The woman put her hands to her face and began to cry. She couldn't believe that her daughter had used her name to justify an affair. She asked me to leave, not out of anger at me, but because she needed to be alone. Everything that happened afterward, I was told later. According to her mother, that same Tuesday, before Carla left early as usual, Mrs. Maria confronted her in front of the entire office. She was furious, and rightly so. She yelled at her that she couldn't believe such a lying and sick person existed. She told her she was fired, that she had to return every cent of the loan, and that if she didn't, she would press legal charges. Carla, confused, tried to deny everything, but it was too late. The boss told everyone everything. How she had lied about her mother's illness, how she used those hours to see another man, even how she had invented a fake inheritance. The entire office fell silent. When she tried to leave, Fernanda arrived at the company. I don't know if someone called her or if she just showed up at the worst possible moment, but the scene was brutal. In front of everyone, she slapped her, and since everyone already knew the truth, no one intervened. The rumor spread like wildfire. The whole company already knew who Carla was and what she had done. She tried to contact me, but couldn't. At the apartment, she only found her mother, who had gone to wait for her. What she told her was simple, that she was ashamed, that she couldn't believe a daughter of hers was capable of something so low, and that she wouldn't help her find me because I didn't want to see her anymore. The biggest blow came from the professional side. Mrs. Maria, humiliated and enraged, made sure the dismissal was registered as for just cause. This meant Carla lost any possibility of severance pay. Furthermore, since the loan had not yet been fully deducted, the company applied the remainder directly to her final settlement, leaving her with practically not a single dollar. According to what her mother told me, Carla ended up giving almost all the savings she had in her account to cover the debt. And it didn't end there. The boss spoke with acquaintances in the industry, made it clear she would not give positive references, and soon no one wanted to hire her. Fernanda, still furious, confronted her again weeks later and hit her again. Martín was fired from his job when Fernanda's father found out about everything, and, to top it all off, Carla's mother, devastated, refused to give her shelter. She told her that everything that was happening to her was a direct consequence of her lies, and that now she had to take charge of her own life. Her mother, who told me all this. Carla lost everything. Her job, her friends, her lover, and her own family. I tried not to be happy about it, but it would be a lie to say I didn't feel relieved. It was as if finally the full weight of her lies had collapsed on top of her. Sometimes I wonder how many more lies she must have told me over those years. How many times she must have looked me in the eye, inventing stories that I believed without a doubt. If she had only been unfaithful, it would have made some sense. But the number of lies, the gratuitousness of each one, how easy it was for her to tell them, that's what ended up scaring me. Today I try not to think about her. I prefer to believe it was just a brutal lesson, a warning of what a person can hide behind a smile. Because if I learned anything, it's that there are lies that are not told to cover up guilt. There are lies that are told simply because you can.